Greetings, class. How we doing? I hope you are well. Here we are. You're viewing this either Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. Lord willing, at least many of us will be back in class in person on Friday. But we're into just another lesson here in our in Unit 3. We've just got a couple of more. Remember, this week we have our Bible Project video about bad words from the Bible. The words for the Hebrew words for sin, iniquity, and transgression. So it's 3 short Bible Project videos on YouTube, and an accompanying worksheet on Google Classroom. So remember that that's due Friday. Some of you may have that done already, which is great. But that's our last major homework assignment of the quarter. So make sure that you're on top of that. Next week, either Wednesday or Thursday, depending on your class, we have our Unit 3 test, and that's it for the quarter. So last time we were together, or last time, we were together via Zoom and via Edpuzzle. We walked through that climactic story, or that cataclysmic story of the fall, or the rebellion of Adam and Eve against God's rule as their king. They decided to define good and evil for themselves, and eat of the fruit of the tree, which severely, at least momentarily, sort of severed their relationship both with each other and with God. God then moving to restore it, disciplining them, disciplining the serpent, who is Satan, and promising one who would crush the head of the serpent in the future. So we move out of the garden. Adam and Eve have been kicked out of the garden with that expectation that someone is going to come and crush the head of the serpent and save them. So chapter 4 starts this way. Remember, we've been given this expectation that God gave to Eve, that because of her sin, child raising, childbirth, or maybe just having children in general was going to be painful. So we hear about Adam and Eve's children right out the gate. Now Adam knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain. Cain is their firstborn son. I have given birth to a man with the help of the Lord, or I have begotten a man, the Lord, a man-child, the Lord. Some translations say. So she's praising God that she's had a son, and sees him, I think, as the hoped for redeemer of humanity. Again, she bore his brother Abel. Notice how time is simply summed up here. We don't know how much time passes between them. Maybe these boys are born, within a few months, as close together as possible. Maybe there's a couple of years between them. We don't know. Again, she bore his brother Abel. Abel was a keeper of sheep. Cain was a worker of the ground. So Abel's a shepherd. Cain is a farmer. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. The Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. He was mean-mugging. I don't know. Maybe that's not a thing that anyone says anymore. It was cool in 2007. Okay, so Cain's upset. He's angry because God had regard. He was pleased with Abel's offering and not Cain's. So what's the problem? It's pretty simple, and yet there's confusion. Some have said that God only accepts sacrifice of blood, of animals, of flesh. Well, okay. I could see why one might think that, and yet a careful reading, which we will do later this year, Lord willing, says, well, no, God accepts sacrifices of grain all the time, even for some sin offerings. God accepts sacrifices of grain. So this explanation just doesn't quite pass muster. So what's the problem? Notice what it says about Abel's sacrifice. He brought the firstborn and the fat portions. Now you're like, fat portions, what is that? Fat portions was the way that the Israelites described the best meat. So the meat that had fat in it. Fat equals flavor, the basic tenet of food. So the fat portions are the filet mignons, the steaks, the roasts of the animal that's being sacrificed, the sheep that's being sacrificed. It's the chops. Okay, he brought the best meat, and he brought the brought the best meat from amongst the firstborn. So notice, Abel brought his first and his best. Now, this would be sort of obvious to the people of Moses' time and later, because they were used to doing sacrifices. You don't bring to God a sacrifice of whatever you have left over. It's not what you do. You bring to God your first and your best. Notice what it says about Cain's sacrifice. Look, this is it's subtle, at least for us, not so for them. Okay. It says, in the course of time, Cain brought an offering from the fruit of the ground, from his crop, just an offering from the fruit. Abel brought the first and the best from his flock. So what did Cain bring? Some. Was it the first? Apparently not. Was it the best? Also apparently not. It was just some. Now, Cain's angry. Cain's angry that his offering wasn't accepted. That's too big. Okay. Cain's angry that his offering wasn't accepted. So, who is he angry at and why? The Lord says to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Yikes. Who is Cain angry at? Cain's angry at Abel. Did Abel do anything wrong? No. If Abel had made a lousy sacrifice, would God have been pleased with Cain? No. He would have been angry with both of them. Okay. Cain's upset as an excuse. Cain's angry at his brother as an excuse for his own failure. Cain has no one to blame except himself. But here he is. So God says to him, why are you angry? If you do well, will you not be accepted? What does this mean? If you do well. Well, Cain's given a subpar sacrifice. What does he need to do? Well, he needs to offer his first and his best. He needs to repent of his lousy sacrifice, ask forgiveness, and make right sacrifice in its place. He says, look, God says to him, look, if you do not do well, sin is crouching at your door. Crouching like a lion. Okay, it's going to devour you. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. So look, Cain, you need to rule over your sinful desire. What does that mean? What does it mean for us? God says the same to us. Do well. Don't be angry at someone else when you sin. Its desire is for you. and you must rule over it. So why do we do that? Well, look at what God says. He says, do well. Clearly, doing well in the face of our own sin means repent and do what's right. If Cain repents, God, it's my fault. I didn't give you my first and my best. Here's my first and my best. Would he be angry at Abel anymore? No. Would God be pleased with him? Yes. But Cain doesn't do that. Instead, he goes to his brother. He spoke to his brother Abel. When they were out in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel, and killed him. Here we have the first murder between brothers. Cain murders Abel, not because Abel did anything wrong, but because Abel did right and Cain did wrong. So he doubles down on his wrongdoing and kills his brother. Then the Lord comes to Cain again. Cain, where is your brother Abel? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? The Lord's only asking questions he already knows the answer to. The Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Here we have an interesting expression, right? This is metaphorical. Does blood cry out? No. So what's he saying? What sort of speech is this? I think it's personification. God is giving, or is it anthropomorphism? Shoot. Let's grab my notes. It's not going to be in there. God's giving human characteristics to a non-human thing, right? Anthropomorphism or personification. I forget which. I think it's in your notes. So he says, look, I know that your brother's blood has been shed. I know Abel's dead, and I know you did it. So fess up. But God goes right into Cain's discipline, his punishment. You are now cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood. No longer will you be allowed to farm. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. And there's some question as to how this ought to be translated. It's a difficult phrase. Maybe or my punishment is too great, or something great is my punishment. He says, behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. Then the Lord said to him, not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest anyone lest anyone who found him should attack him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So Cain is concerned. God, my family, my community will kill me for the murder that I've done. And you've taken away my farm. What am I to do? God says, look, punishment is from me alone. He gives him a mark. We don't know what this means, but some sort of warning that Cain is not to be killed. Just curious. It's an interesting story. Now, there's also sort of riddled with questions. Well, who would go out and kill Cain? Adam? Adam's next son, Seth? Maybe it is that many generations have passed at this point, and there's a vibrant community, or many generations have sort of come into existence at this point. Cain and Abel, or Cain and Seth, live quite a long time. Maybe we have one of these situations where, it says Eve gave birth to, and really we're talking about a descendant here. We're not entirely sure, but Cain's a fearful that someone will come and kill him. And so he settles in Nod, east of Eden. Now, so we see here sort of an initial introduction to what villainy looks like. Today we're looking at villains in Genesis. All of them are sort of all of the wickedness and evil of the first sort of portion of the Torah, and really the evil that sort of permeates human existence is set up here in the early parts of Genesis. Cain is set up as a murderer, and then in the line of Cain, we're going to meet sort of our next villain, who's going to prepare us for yet another set of villains, which is going to all make sense of the rest of Genesis and the Exodus story. So Cain kills his brother Abel. Abel is replaced, in a sense, by Seth, the next son of Adam and Eve. And Cain and Seth make up two genealogies. Seth is going to be considered the line of promise, the genealogy of the people of God, or the genealogy of Eve, and Cain's going to be the genealogy of the serpent, those who reject God. So Cain's genealogy introduces to us villains. And we know his name already from the Bible Project video. We get just a snippet here from Cain's genealogy. Cain knew his wife. She conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after his son, Enoch. Enoch bore Arad. Arad bore Mehujael. Mehujael bore Methushael. Methushael bore Lamech. And Lamech took two wives. The name of the one was Adah, and the name of the other was Zillah. Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, Lamech's is 77-fold. So Lamech is really the archetype, the quintessential example of early Torah villains. He is violent, extremely so, violent in an unjust way. God's going to say eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life. God even gives Cain some protection for some reason. But Lamech is going to say, look, I'm 10 times more violent than Cain. If someone harms me, the kid bumps into me, I'll kill him. If someone wounds me, justly or unjustly, I'll kill him too. So you punch me in the face, I'll kill you. You bump into me, I'll kill you. You look at me funny, I'll kill you. That's Lamech, right? And Lamech is going to be the first one to practice polygamy. He's going to be the first man with multiple wives. Okay, so here we have the marks of villains in Torah. They lust for many women, and they're violent. Okay, God's design is for a man and a woman to be married, one man, one woman. Lamech violates that and takes many wives. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Now, fast forward, 10 generations, we move through the genealogies, and we arrive here at chapter 6, which is going to be the start of the flood story. But to understand the flood story well, we've got to get a sense of the villains, okay, of the reason for it. Now, in many ways, our Sunday school lessons have done us a deep disservice in describing the flood. We've made it. I mean, how many Sunday school rooms have we been in where there's an ark on calm blue water, and we've got all the animals sort of on top of the ark with the giraffe sticking its head out the window. You know, happy animals on a happy ark with a happy sun and happy clouds, right? Remember, the flood wipes out all of humanity other than Noah and his family, right? It's a judgment. Those happy pictures should have in the water like dead bodies. Feel a little bit more like accurate to the story. Okay. Um, this is not a happy story. It's not a story that invites us to go to the zoo, right? It's a story about God's righteous judgment on sinful humanity. So we've got to get our sense of the story. And there's some confusion here that we want to clear up. It says, when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. And the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth. It grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made man. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Now, what in the world is going on here? There's deep confusion because some of the terminology here is somewhat tricky to discern. Notice it says, men were multiplying on the face of the earth, and the sons of God, stop. Who are the sons of God? Saw that the daughters of man were attractive. Okay, so here we go. We've got characters that need discernment. Sons of God, daughters of man. The sons of God were taking these women, any they chose. This sounds like abduction. Okay, they're taking them as wives. Okay, which causes God to say, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. Again, confusion there. And what's this 120 years about? And then it says, the Nephilim. Whoa. Nephilim, that's not a word. What are we talking about here? It says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. These were mighty men who were of old, men of renown. So, what's up with this? Who are these characters? Who are sons of God, daughters of man, and Nephilim? Notice for a second, the sons of God were taking for themselves any women they chose. Okay, so we have, I think, abduction, rape, sexual immorality for sure. And then we've got, he says, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth. Every intention of his heart was only evil. Now we got to go another verse. If we see, verse 11, we get an explanation of what that wickedness is. The earth was filled with violence. Okay, so what we get here is the two things that we saw from Lamech and Cain: violence and sexual immorality. In specifically polygamy, right? So, who are the sons of God, the daughters of men, and Nephilim? Well, two interpretations. Okay, the first one here in the United States, at least, is the most common. The first one, at least here in the United States, is the most common, and understand that. Mr. Scheid and Mrs. Reynolds both hold this view, and so do the guys at the Bible Project. Okay, I'm going to be sort of the odd one out here, and I'll try to explain why. Sons of God. The argument is that sons of God is actually a reference to angels. Interesting, right? But there's a now. Where does this come from? Well, it comes from like the opening chapters of Job. Where God is meeting, he's having a meeting, Satan shows up, It says that that in the Lord's presence are the sons of God, and it's assumed that that means angels. But look, so let's take that at face value. Okay, sons of God, angels. So it says this then. It says that angels were taking human women as their wives. So the result then is that the Nephilim are understood that it's understood to be a term referring to some sort of angel-human hybrid. And what we read as mighty men of old, men of renown, in the King James Version, in an older English translation, was translated giants. So, angels, fallen angels, we would call them demons, were shacking up with human women, taking them, raping them, marrying them, and producing on the earth giants, mighty warrior, giant, angel-human hybrids. It's like, wow, that makes for a great science fiction story, right? Interesting. Now, back up. No, we'll go forward. Okay. Second interpretation, the one I'm going to argue for, is this: nowhere in the Bible are angels ever called sons of God. In fact, every other instance of son of God, where the meaning is clear, we're describing human beings, or like Jesus, who is both human and God. In the ancient world, from Pharaoh to Caesar, those who called themselves sons of God were the kings. The kings always, or at least if not always, often called themselves either gods or sons of a god. Okay? Now, this is going to make sense, right? Who in the ancient world had multiple wives? Often we assume, well, it was everybody. Jacob did. Didn't all the guys have multiple wives? Well, no, actually. In fact, having multiple wives, well, one, it's really expensive. But in general, like, it's actually really rare. Only the wealthy, and generally, like, only the kings had multiple wives. There's going to be a couple of, like, exceptions. If your wife was infertile, you may take a second wife from among your servants to have children in her place. We're going to see Sarah and Abraham do just that with Hagar. So the reality is that, like, most people, vast majority of people, did not have multiple wives. It's only the extremely wealthy, and in particular the kings, that are going to have multiple wives. So here we have sons of God, kings, kings of cities, right? Abducting women to force them into being their wives. This sounds familiar. Who abducts Sarah to take her as their wife? Pharaoh and Abimelech, both kings. Okay. So what then do we do with Nephilim? These mighty men of old, men of renown. Well, Nephilim is thought to be sort of like tricky, right? Because it's a Hebrew word that we just don't know what it means. So we leave it in the Hebrew in the English, which leads to all sorts of sort of wild speculation. Some people thought this means aliens. Some people think all sorts of crazy things because it's an untranslated Hebrew word, because we just don't know what it means. Well, imagine if you came across the word like sergeant or lieutenant in something that you were translating. How do you translate those? They're sort of military ranks, right? Well, I think that's actually exactly what we have happening here. We have an old term that doesn't have like a clearly defined equivalent in like modern English, or at least not one that we're confident of. So what I think we have here is that amongst the elite, amongst the kings, their sons became a class of warrior princes. Think something like maybe the Spartans, right? Spartans were not just anybody. They were the sons of the elite. They were specially outfitted and specially trained to fight. So it says Nephilim were on the earth in those days and after, which is interesting. Okay. Now they were, back in the day, it was translated as giants. We think, okay, most people were fairly short in the ancient world, much shorter than we are today. Sometimes doorways in places like Europe and the Middle East will sort of evidence that. You have to duck down to get in because people are shorter. Why are people shorter? Well, because their diet. A diet rich in protein, like a modern American diet, is going to lead to more muscle growth, which leads to more height. Malnourished people don't grow as much because they lack the nutrients, right? So a class of sons of kings eating a rich diet, being trained in military, become large, become well-trained fighters, well-equipped fighters, become a class of warrior princes known as Nephilim. Okay, makes sense? So let's look at the two. Well, there's a significant problem here with God's solution. It's stated in verse 5 that the wickedness of humanity was great on the earth, which is explained as rampant violence in verse 11, and the abduction of women and forcing them to marry a group called the sons of God. Okay, that's the problem. God's solution to the problem in verse 7 is to eliminate humanity. He's going to wipe out human beings other than Noah from the earth using a flood. So my question is, if the problem is angels, why is God's solution to wipe out humanity? Can angels be drowned? Like in sort of silly fashion, while the Nephilim are giants, Nephilim are huge. Does that make like Shaquille O'Neal and Yao Ming Nephilim? Is it our God-given task to go drown them because they're wicked angel-human hybrids? Hear me, I am being super silly here. Like, look, what do we do with this? If God's solution is to wipe out humanity, it wouldn't seem that a just God would see a problem with angels as a problem with humanity and judge humanity for the sins of angels. So, an argument against interpretation 1. The interpretation above, interpretation 1, focuses the problem in Genesis 6 on fallen angels taking human women as wives, producing apparently wicked and powerful hybrid offspring. While a popular interpretation in some circles, this interpretation doesn't make any sense with a larger context. In particular, look, Matthew 22:30 says angels do not marry. We also have no reason to believe that angels or demons are capable of producing offspring. The angels have the right parts to mate with human women. Doesn't seem likely. It's a terrifying thing. What's to stop them from doing that now? Okay, so angels don't have kids with other angels, let alone with humans. They lack the plumbing and the power, and they don't marry. Okay, if the problem was with angels, then God's condemnation of humanity and his move to wipe out all of humanity doesn't seem to solve the problem. And notice, he says, look, the Nephilim show up back on the earth again. This position simply doesn't make sense of the data. So what does? Well, we're going to argue for interpretation 2. Throughout the ancient world, kings, both of large empires and of small city-states, claimed to be deities or sons of deities, okay, sons of gods. These same sorts of kings, Pharaoh and Abimelech, are noted as seizing women against their will in order to forcibly marry them. We'll explain that a little bit more later on. The term sons of God typically refers to followers of God, but clearly means something else here. There's no clear examples of angels ever being called sons of God. Given that the Torah was written from the perspectives of those who have just left Egypt and the tyranny of the divine Pharaoh, it seems likely that sons of God meant kings or rulers. And Nephilim is a class, Nephilim then becomes a class of warrior princes. So what you have here is men abducting and raping women, forcing them into marriages that are more like slavery, and raising up sons who are violent to the extreme. Sound familiar? We face this sort of thing all the time. So, that's going to be our setup for the problem. Okay, um, we've got humans full of sin, sexual immorality, adultery, polygamy. Okay, the world is rife with sexual morality and violence, and God's not going to put up with it. So he says, "My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years." Well, what does that mean? Often we've said, well, what that means is that no man, no human being will live to be more than 120 years old after the flood. Well, that's interesting, except that Noah does live more than 120 years. Maybe Abraham does. Moses lives exactly 120 years. Again, if we look at the data in the genealogies, that doesn't seem to work. Now, it is true. Like almost no one lives to be 120 years old today. No one lives older than that. But at the same time, like most people don't live past 90. So what's up? What is this if it's not a limit on the age of human beings? I'm arguing, and I think the context supports this, that what's being argued for here is a countdown to God's flood. God says, 120 years, I'm done. And so he's going to give Noah the charge to build an ark to save human beings and all sorts of land creatures and birds, because judgment's coming. Okay, that's it for today. More about the flood next time. We've got to wrap up the flood. So we're going to look at the flood itself. We're going to look at God's covenant with Noah. We're going to look at the sin of Ham, try to figure out what that's all about, and look at the story of the Tower of Babel. So one major story and then a small story left to wrap up before we're done with Unit 3. Okay, I love you guys. God bless you. Have a great day. See you hopefully really, really soon.